kind introduction. And it gives me a great pleasure to be here this morning. I'd like to recognize the Olashore family, Princess Olapeju and Prince Abimbola, and to congratulate you on this wonderful milestone of 25 years of Olashore International School. That's really quite an accomplishment, and I'm deeply honored that you invited me here to give a lecture on this auspicious occasion. Also, I'd like to recognize Dr. Christopher Kolade, who is one of the icons of leadership in Nigeria. So I think it's really fitting that he's here, as well as, of course, Professor Ibidapo Obe, who you'll be hearing from soon, and Chief Felix Fagbu. Did I pronounce it correctly? Yes, I'm still learning my Nigerian pronunciation. So, being here at 25 years old is actually something that is remarkable. Not only for a school, but in general as an African organization. You see, because one of the things that we're very good at doing in Africa is starting projects. But we're not very good at building institutions. Institutions that live beyond those who started them. And for society to develop, we need to be able to build institutions that will live 50, 100, 200 years, because that's how long it takes to develop society. And so I want us to take a moment just to recognize how remarkable this is, that we are here 25 years after an institution was founded, and that this vision is continuing after the founder has passed on. So it's really a remarkable thing that I personally believe in, and that if we are going to develop Africa, we need to get much better at building institutions. Because institutions are those that carry the values of a society and allow us to become less dependent on leaders. Because today, I believe that Africa is too dependent on its leaders. And when we have good leaders, then societies work. But when we have bad leaders, then we destroy many of our societies, and that's because we don't have these strong institutions that can act as checks and balances to their powers. So what are these institutions? We need to be building our judiciary, our civil service, the media, the academic institutions, the health institutions, and the rules and that govern how a society works. So again, really a great pleasure to see here an African institution of excellence. And I wish everyone that is involved in this project, the staff, the students, the current head, that this journey continues for another 25, 50, 200 years. And this is really just the beginning. I was very excited to see on your logo that you've been developing leaders for 25 years. Because leadership development is something that I'm very personally passionate about. As was mentioned before, Adolaji, who's one of the young leaders that we are fortunate to be involved with, she went from Olashore to the African Leadership Academy. And our goal is to develop 3 million leaders for Africa in the next 16 years. So clearly, leadership is something that I'm very passionate about, and that I believe, and we as the African Leadership Group believe, is going to make the difference for Africa. Africa, we believe, is going to be made or broken by the leaders that it develops. And that's because we don't have these strong institutions. See, everyone might think, of course, every society needs good leaders. But I argue that Africa needs good leaders far better than the rest of the world, because the difference that one leader can make in Africa is much greater than anywhere else in the world, because we don't have these institutions. Because if someone becomes a president of the United States, let's say Donald Trump. He can try to do all kinds of things, but there's a very strong Senate that will stop him from doing the most egregious things. He tried to build a wall, they've stopped him. He tried to, stop Muslims from coming to the country. They stopped him. If he wants to stay in power forever, there's a very strong system, a constitution that is 300 years old, that will stop him. So, Donald Trump will come, Donald Trump will go, but the United States will survive because of these strong institutions. In Africa, we don't have very strong institutions. And so just one good leader or one bad leader can destroy things far greater than in any other country, like we've seen in so many countries in Africa. I won't name the countries, but we all know what I'm talking about. It's also, however, very refreshing when you see what good leadership can do, because the fact that we don't have these strong institutions means that a good leader can therefore make much more progress in Africa than in other parts of the world. As we saw even, for example, when you had President Obama trying to introduce something that one would expect is a good thing, healthcare. Let's give all Americans free healthcare. Again, because of the institutions, they stopped him from fully applying that vision. So we have a unique window of opportunity in Africa where we don't have strong institutions, where if we were to develop good leaders, we can actually make tremendous progress, far greater than other parts of the world. And if you doubt that this is possible, I invite all of you to visit Rwanda. Rwanda is a remarkable success story in Africa. Any African country who doesn't believe that there's hope for their country needs to go to Rwanda. Because where Rwanda was 25 years ago, 1 million people have been killed in a genocide in 3 months. Everything has been destroyed. No infrastructure. The entire fabric of society has gone. You cannot believe, there's no country today in Africa that was as worse off as Rwanda was 25 years ago. Nigeria is way ahead of where Rwanda was 25 years ago. Ghana, way ahead. South Africa, way ahead. But yet, when you go and you see what has happened in 25 years, you won't believe it. Rwanda looks like Switzerland today. Infrastructure, beautiful. You want to get a passport, 48 hours as a citizen you get a passport. You can track the progress of your passport as it's going through the process online. Everything moves extremely efficiently. They've made tremendous gains in the citizens of their lives, healthcare, education, all the indicators. And that's because of good leadership. So it is possible here on this continent. And we must not lose hope, despite all the challenges that we see. If you want to see how good leadership and just the impact that it can have, I invite all of you to go and look at Rwanda, and it will renew your hope in what you're doing here, and to keep going. So, how then do we think about leadership, especially here in the Nigerian context? One of the things that I believe we all need to be much more aware of is just the sense of urgency with which we need to get leadership right in this country. I'm not sure if you all know, but Nigeria has taken over, according to the Brookings Institution, as the country in the world which has the highest number of extremely poor people in the world. It has taken over from India, that used to have this number. Now, India's population is 1.3 billion. Nigeria's is 200 million, or I don't know what it is these days, it keeps growing. So for Nigeria to have the largest number of poor people, of extremely poor people in the world, with its smaller population than India, is something that's quite telling. And according to this report, the number of Nigerians living in extreme poverty increases by 6 people every single minute. 6 people every single minute. More people are living in extreme poverty. That's defined as less than $1.90 per day. And it's projected that by 2050, over 40% of the entire world's extremely poor people will live in 2 countries only, the DRC and Nigeria. Now this is a country that has oil wealth, that has the ingenuity of 200 million people, that has so much abundant land and sunshine. It does not make sense why this should be the case. And so, the issue of leadership and getting it right in Nigeria is not just something that is crucial for this country, but it's really one of the most important things that this world needs to get right in this century. Because if, like I said, if 40% of the world's extremely poor people are going to be here in DRC, the world has to get this right. Nigeria has to get this right for the world's benefit. And so the role of an institution like Olashore and its aspiration to develop leaders for Nigeria cannot be understated in this context. This is not a luxury that we are, the journey that Olashore is. It is an absolute necessity, not just for Nigeria, but for the whole world. And so again, I want to applaud you for having taken on this mission and to encourage you, because getting it right means turning around a country that has so much promise and helping to really and therefore turn around the world. Because we cannot, in the 21st century, still have people who are living on less than $2 a day. Now, one question that I'm often asked is it possible to teach leadership? Can you actually teach someone to be a leader? This is an age-old question. Are you born a leader, or can you develop into a leader? Can you teach leadership or not? Over the years, I've come to develop a perspective on this issue, and I'd like to share that with you now. Our perspective at the African Leadership Group is that leadership is actually not something that you can teach. Listen to that carefully. Leadership, we believe, is not something that you can teach. However, leadership can be learned. And this is the difference. There is a difference between teaching someone something and the person learning it for themselves. You cannot call yourself a leader if you are expecting someone to tell you how to lead or how to do things. Because leaders are meant to be agents of change, and they're meant to be self-starters. They're meant to be there to serve others, to solve problems. Therefore, if they are waiting to be told what to do, they are not leading. And so that's what we mean when we say that it's almost like where they say you can take a horse to the water, but you cannot force the horse to drink. In the same way, as we are developing young people, we can create the conditions that will allow leadership to emerge. But at the end of the day, the young people that we're grooming must step up to the plate. And they must capture these opportunities that they're being given. Because when they go out into the world and they're driving change, they will be expected to be the catalyst, the energy that's going to bring change to society, and not to be waiting for instructions. And so as we think about And so one of the most important things that we believe enables leaders to emerge is culture. What sort of culture are you creating in Olashore and the other schools that are here that enables young people to see themselves as agents of positive change? How are you instilling in them the confidence and the belief that they can lead? How are you instilling in them the sense of service, such that they understand that the role of a leader is not to benefit themselves and to reach themselves and to become powerful, but really to serve others? There's something that I often say that, and this is something that has always struck me since I was a child. I grew up in different countries in Africa. I was born in Ghana. You might not think that I'm Ghanaian because I'm light-skinned. People think I'm South African, but I'm Ghanaian. And I left Ghana at the age of 4, and then I went to Gambia, and then I went to Botswana, and then I went to Zimbabwe. Every 4 years of my life, I moved to a new country in Africa. So I really became passionate about the continent. But something bothered me as I was growing up in all these countries. My dad was a civil servant, he was a magistrate, and my mother was a teacher. So we were not wealthy by any means. But I had a roof over my head, and 3 meals a day, and I got education. And I wondered often, why me? When there were so many people in the streets, in all these countries that I lived in, that were begging. They didn't have education, they didn't have a roof over their head, they didn't have food. Eventually, the only way that I was able to reconcile this was that perhaps I was being given these opportunities so that I could create opportunities for others. And so today, one thing that I say is that every single person in this room, every single student who goes to Olashore, who has had the benefits of being healthy, who has survived to the age that you have lived up to, who has education, the only way that you can justify your privilege is by solving problems for society and by serving others. Otherwise, we don't deserve this privilege. The only way that you can justify having had these opportunities is to use the talents, the education, the networks that we have to solve not the smallest problems in society, but the biggest problems. And one of the mottos we have at the African Leadership Group is we say, do hard things. To really signify that it's the role of leaders to solve the hardest problems, to tackle the big challenges, to tackle corruption, to tackle unemployment, to tackle gender inequality, to tackle malnutrition, all these challenges that we're facing. This is what, if a job is done well, the leaders coming, the graduates from Olashore should be doing. I'm also often asked about the traits that make great leaders. And over time, my answer to this is that there are 5 things that all good leaders should have. And that as we look for young people to develop, whether at the African Leadership Academy, at the African Leadership University, and even here at Olashore, I believe that leaders, especially those who are going to lead Africa in this century, must have 5 traits. The first is that leaders must have passion. There must be something that they are passionate about solving. It could be healthcare, it could be education, it could be agriculture, it could be the arts, it could be politics. But we need leaders who are passionate about all kinds of things, because passion is what gives you that fire to wake up and to really want to serve, and that obsession to drive change in society. You must be passionate about something. And so as we look for young people to bring into places like Olashore, we must find people who are passionate. And more importantly, the culture must enable and nurture the passions of young people so that they can carry on these passions as they become leaders. The second is imagination. Leaders must be able to imagine a better future and to be able to paint a vision of a world that does not yet exist, and to be able to inspire people about why that future is a better future. And so therefore, it's important that we nurture the dreams and the imaginations of young people and not quell them, so that they can continue to imagine and dream. And that's what another key trait of leaders. The third are values. The difference between right and wrong, integrity, humility, compassion, and so forth. Values that really guide the leader in making decisions. And again, this goes to the culture in the school and how do we reinforce values of leadership. The fourth trait that I find is crucial is courage. Because driving change is difficult. The status quo wants to remain the status quo. And there are going to be so many obstacles to a leader trying to drive change. But you cannot lead without courage. And the final trait is resilience. This is that quality that keeps you getting up time and time again after you're knocked down. Because driving change is hard. You need to be able to stay for the long haul. And too often leaders give up. And what I find is that very often the difference between those who succeed, who know what to do, versus those who actually do, is this quality of resilience. And so as educators, it's easy to want to give young people everything that they want. To give them guaranteed opportunities to get access to great colleges, to get access to internships, to jobs, and so forth. One thing we need to be careful about as we groom leaders is that we're not making their lives too easy. Because they need to develop that muscle of resilience. They need to be put in challenging circumstances where they're not happy. So I tell our young leaders that we're developing that our job is not to please them as educators, as groomers or leaders. Our job is to develop them into to develop their muscles, to develop their character, so that they can withstand all the pressures that they're going to face when they go out as leaders. And so that resilience building and putting young people into difficult circumstances is a crucial success factor for any institution that wants to develop leaders. And so all of you who are parents, sometimes you might complain, your child will come and say, oh, we were given hard exams. Yes, they need hard exams. And they don't need, there's a big difference between what people want and what they need. And what young people might want, especially young people who want to be leaders, will be very different from what they need. They might want pizza and hamburgers every day in the dorms. But what they need is nutritious vegetables and fruit every day, right? What they might want is easy exams, but what they need is hard exams. They might want you to guarantee them admission into the best university, or to guarantee them admission in an internship in a job. And you might have the connections to do that. But every time you do that, you are taking away this agency from this young person. Every time you do that, you are reducing their resilience. You're making life too easy for them. They need to learn to do hard things. Because when they go out into the world, you won't be there to give them all these things. And as I mentioned, the role of leaders is not to get things. It's not to be given, it's to give. It's to serve. And so as we think about the culture that we're creating and how we're developing these leaders, I want us to bear that in mind. Now, the rewards though will be great. It's very exciting for me to see some of the young leaders that we are developing as African leadership and what they're already doing. For example, Eddie Okech, a young man from Kenya. 12 years ago, Eddie was a street kid in Nairobi. And we discovered him. He joined the African Leadership Academy. He started to develop his leadership and entrepreneurial skills. And he started a youth movement in Kenya, where he tried to bring together young people across ethnic lines. Because I don't know if you remember, in 2007, there were elections in Kenya which turned very violent. And politicians were pitting young people against each other from different ethnic groups. So Eddie decided to create a movement of young people while he was still at the African Leadership Academy, and to get them to commit not to be manipulated by the politicians. That movement grew to 500,000 people. And by the time the next elections happened in 2012, those 500,000 people had recruited 10 people each. So they had 5 million people who all signed the pledge not to be manipulated by across ethnic lines. And in an electorate of 13 million people, to have touched 5 million people, that was massive impact. Eddie left the African Leadership Academy and went to the United States for his university degree, went to Trinity College, and then he went to Yale University and got a master's degree. And then 2 years ago, at the age of 28, he went back to Kenya and ran in an election to be a senator in a field of about 12 candidates who were all in their 60s and 70s. Eddie, at the age of 28, came second in this election. So, it is possible. We are starting to see change. Some of this new generation of leaders coming out. Some of you may, how many of you have Netflix? There's a movie you should watch on Netflix called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. And this is a movie about another one of our graduates, William Kampamba, a young man from rural Malawi, who at the age of 14 had to drop out of school because his family couldn't afford to pay fees for him. And so he sat at home for 6 years, and during that time, he went to a library and saw a picture of a windmill, and decided that he was going to try and build that windmill using bicycle parts and tractor fan and so forth. And he figured out how to generate electricity from this windmill. But then he sat at home for 6 years. Eventually, his story was picked up in the newspaper, and we discovered him as well. We brought him to the African Leadership Academy. When we tested him academically, even though he was 19 years old, he was in grade 4 in terms of his intellect, in terms of his academic performance. And we said, initially, the teachers in the school said, we can't take this boy. You know, we're selecting young people from all across Africa to do A-levels, and he's in grade 4. And he's 19 years old. How can he perform in this place? So against the wishes of my teachers, I said, no, we're going to take him anyway. Because he's demonstrated the ingenuity and leadership skills that this school is about. William joined us, and within 2 years, he went from being in 4th grade to 12th grade, and graduated and got into an Ivy League university in the US. He went to Dartmouth College. And while he was in the academy, he wrote his book, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, which became a bestseller on Amazon.com. It sold millions of dollars. He's now provided clean drinking water and electricity to about 100 families in his village. He's built a school where he's educating about 1,000 children. And his story has been made into this movie. So I encourage you to watch it on Netflix, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. You can buy his book somewhere. And the final story I'll tell is about Julia Adiloro from Ghana, who's a young woman who came to the academy. And today, she's developed a new technology for screening women for cervical cancer without using a speculum. This is revolutionary technology that can transform the lives of millions of women in Africa. So these are just a few of the stories of change that we're seeing, because we're investing in young leaders. And so, it's not going to be overnight. Transforming Africa is a 50 to 100-year journey. But we have to start today. And it starts with the foundations of leadership that we are developing at African Leadership Group, that you are developing here at Olashore. Now finally, I want to end with one thing that I believe this generation of leaders really needs to bring to Africa. And that is innovation and entrepreneurship. You see, the different generations of leaders that we've had have had a different job to do. The first generation, I think that, in my opinion, there have been 4 different generations of leaders, each that had a different job to do. Generation 1 were the leaders who brought independence. They emerged in the 50s and 60s. Kwame Nkrumahs, the Julius Nyereres, the Rosina Zikiwe in Nigeria. Different leaders who brought independence to Africa. And the main job they had to do was to remove colonialism. And by and large, they succeeded in that endeavor. So let's give them credit for that. The second generation of leaders, the only job that they had, in my opinion, was that they brought chaos to Africa. And these are the leaders that brought the coup d'etats and the corruption and the warfare and so many things that Africa became known for. Thankfully, most of those leaders have also moved on. And today, we have more democracy in Africa and more peace and stability than there was 20, 30 years ago. We still have pockets flaring up in Sudan and so forth, but compared to where it was 20 years ago, Africa is in a completely different space. We have much more stability now. And that's the job that the third generation of leaders did. They brought stability to Africa. So generation 1 was independence. Generation 2 was chaos. Generation 3 was stability. Now, generation 4, which is the generation that we are developing and that you are developing, there's one job that they need to do, which the previous generations have not done, which is eliminate poverty. This is the generation that needs to create wealth in Africa. Because unless we can create wealth, we're not truly dependent. We're still begging the rest of the world for aid. We need to be able to generate our own wealth so that we can pave our own roads, educate our children, feed ourselves, and really create prosperity and a decent standard of living for everyone. But this wealth creation that must happen is not wealth creation for self. It's wealth creation for the nation, for society, to reduce inequality. And it's more important, it's about job creation. Because Africa is going to have the largest workforce in the world by 2035, which is about 5,700 days from today. It's not a lot of time. So when we think about solving such a big challenge, and especially here in Nigeria, where, as I mentioned, we are on track to have, between Nigeria and the DRC, the largest concentration of extremely poor people in the world by 2050. We cannot do things the conventional way. We need to reimagine everything and to think about disruptive ideas, innovation, and entrepreneurship. How are we going to leapfrog? For example, one thing I read once somewhere that Nigeria has a backlog of about 20 million homes that need to be built. And today, less than 200,000 homes are being built. There are many, many challenges that need to be solved in terms of construction, permits, and land tenure, and the banks giving mortgage finance, and so forth, in order for this to be solved. So if we say we're going to do the conventional way, we'll be sitting here 40, 50 years from now, and that backlog of 20 million homes will go to 40 million homes, will go to 60 million homes. Recently, I learned about an interesting technology. They've developed a new technology for 3D printing homes, where for less than $4,000, they can 3D print a home in 24 hours. Less than $4,000, 3D printed, 3-bedroom home, 24 hours. That's the kind of disruption that we need. We must leapfrog. Instead of going on to trying to build conventional homes, imagination and innovation can allow us to think about new possibilities like 3D printing homes. And within a generation, within 10 years, we can solve that backlog of homes in Nigeria. And that's just one example in something like housing, low-cost housing, and urbanization as this country urbanizes. We're going to need to think similarly unconventionally in healthcare, in education. In African Leadership University, for example, where we decided to completely reimagine how education is done. One of the constraints we had was that we didn't have enough professors. So we decided to rethink and make the learning model be driven by students and technology and so forth. And in reimagining that, today, African Leadership University has been recognized as the #1 most innovative company in Africa. And of all the 50 most innovative companies in the world that Fast Company came up with recently, they had a list, which number 15 on the list was Apple, number 17 on the list was Apple, number 15 on the list was Alibaba from China, number 39 was African Leadership University. Wow. The only university in the world, not Oxford, not Cambridge, not Stanford, but an African university, because again, we dared to reimagine and to think about leapfrogging and building the university of the future, using technology and different ways of thinking and teaching and so forth. So I end by saying that as we develop these young leaders and the culture that we create, let's challenge them to reimagine, to reinvent, to be disruptive. Because we cannot solve our problems in Africa using conventional methods. We don't have time, we don't have money, and the urgency is real. So Godspeed to you in the next 25 and even to the next 50 years as we pursue this shared vision for a more prosperous and peaceful Africa. Thank you.